Hello everyone, and welcome to the Puzzle Proof, your go-to corner of the internet for unraveling mysteries, brain teasers, and everything that keeps your little grey cells buzzing. I'm thrilled you've joined us today. Before we dive in, drop a comment below and let me know, where in the world are you tuning in from? Can't wait to see our community map grow.
Chapter 1. Silence at Harwood Manor. A low mist clung to the ancient oaks that lined the gravel drive to Harwood Manor, their gnarled branches bowing as though in sorrowful welcome. Father Brown stepped from the carriage into the autumnal hush, his simple black cassock brushing the dew-laden grass. The house loomed before him, stone walls dark as portent, mullioned windows shuttered against the chill. Though new to the county, he bore the quiet authority of one who listens more than he speaks, his round, inquiring eyes betraying a mind ever at work. Inside the great hall, a single wax candle flickered upon a high-backed oak chair, its light casting dancing shadows upon a tapestry of ancestral arms. The still form of Mr. Algernon Firth lay slumped at the foot of the chair, his head bowed in eternal resignation. The heavy study door stood fast, bolted from within, with no sign of forced entry or disturbance. A hush more potent than fear filled the room, as if the very air held its breath. Lord Beaumont, the master of the estate, stood by a mullioned window, his fine shoulders drawn tight with indignation. His voice, when he spoke, was low and brittle. My son was not given to despair. He had fortune, family, and future. Lady Beaumont, pale-lipped and tremulous, clutched a lace handkerchief, her tears quiet but unending. She touched her husband's arm, only to draw it away, as though even sorrow demanded its boundaries. Dr. Percival, a scholar whose tweed jacket carried the faint scent of ancient tomes, examined the body with clinical detachment. He adjusted his pince-nez and murmured of forensic oddities and physiological improbabilities, as if speaking the very words aloud might lessen their strangeness. Mrs. Ogden, the housekeeper, stood nearby in a neat grey dress, her cheeks flushed with indignation and grief in equal measure. She fussed at a stray curl of hair that had escaped her bun, as though tending to order in appearance might stave off chaos in the soul. Mr. Fenton, the county magistrate, paced between the tapestry and the shuttered door, ticking off details on his slender fingers. No note, no sign of coercion. Locked from within. Suicide, one must conclude, tragic, but straightforward. He offered his conclusion with the air of one who, having drawn the final verdict, need concern himself no further with unease. Father Brown, meanwhile, knelt by the fallen young man. His kindly face bore no shock, only a calm interest. He closed his eyes for a moment, as though offering a silent prayer for the departed soul. Then, gently lifting the flickering candle, he looked upon the scene with unhurried care. His gaze settled upon a small footprint in the grate's ashen dust, slender, delicate, and clearly not the shoe of the deceased. Curious, he whispered, more to himself than to any assembled personage. He rose, pressing his palms together just below his waist in a gesture half of penance, half of contemplation. There is much we cannot see, even in the clearest light, he said at last, addressing the room with a voice that carried neither accusation nor fear, but rather the courteous insistence of truth. Let us remember that the human heart is a dark chamber where longing, shame, and hope play their silent roles. A sudden gust rattled the hall's tall windows, and the candle flickered perilously. Mrs. Ogden hastened forward to steady the flame, her eyes darting from Father Brown to the closed door. Lord Beaumont cleared his throat. Father Brown, perhaps you will deign to tell us whether you consider this indeed a case of self-inflicted death, or if some darker hand may have been at work. The little priest inclined his head. I do not presume to speak too soon, he replied, for in every mortal mystery, patience is as necessary as inquiry. Yet I confess that the stillness of this chamber tells me there are questions we ought to ask, questions of motive, of opportunity, and especially of the conscience. He paused, offering a faint, rueful smile. Perhaps tomorrow, we might speak one by one, and share what we know of Algernon's state of mind in these last days. Lady Beaumont's pale hand fluttered to her throat. He was troubled, she managed. Algernon spoke rarely, and often in half smiles. He read strange books in secret, they say. Dr. Percival's pince-nez caught the lamplight. Books of ancient rites and philosophies, yes. He had a taste for things otherworldly. Father Brown nodded thoughtfully. A taste for shadows need not be a summons to them. But even the faintest appetite for the unknown may lead a man into perilous passages. Tomorrow, then, we shall begin at dawn, if it pleases you all. For now, let us allow Algernon's spirit to rest, and our minds to rest with it, if only until morning's light brings new clarity. With that, he stepped back, allowing the hush to settle once more. The assembled party watched him, some with gratitude, some with suspicion, but all with the unspoken realization that the gentle priest, so unassuming, so mild, had already become their compass in a darkness far deeper than a mere locked door could conceal. And outside, the oak stood silent sentinel, waiting for the truth to awaken with the sun. Chapter 2. Whispers in the gallery. Morning sunlight crept through the tall, arched windows of the gallery, touching the dust motes that danced like secret sprites in the air. The room stretched long and narrow, its walls lined with ancestral portraits whose painted eyes seemed to follow each visitor with solemn curiosity. Silk damask drapes of forest green hung heavy as memory, framing each visage in velvet gloom. Father Brown paused beneath a pallid likeness of Sir Edmund Harwood, his warm gaze softening in quiet empathy. It was in such company that the living felt most exposed, their truths laid bare by portraits commissioned to celebrate strength but capable of revealing frailty. Lord Beaumont entered first, his gait measured, his shoulders squared against the morning's chill. He offered a courteous nod to the priest, though his eyes remained fixed upon Algernon's posthumous seat at the far end of the hall. Lady Beaumont followed, her lips pressed into a line of anguished resolve. She draped a slender hand over her husband's arm, then withdrew it as though fearful of imposing her grief upon his stoic composure. The boy spent many an hour here, she whispered to Father Brown, her voice scarcely louder than a sigh. He said the ancestral eyes gave him company. Mrs. Ogden hovered near a marble-topped table, smoothing her apron as though it were armor against chaos. He would pace these boards at odd hours, she confessed, glancing toward the high-backed oak chair now empty of its grim occupant. I heard him murmur to himself in the night. I thought it nerves, or youthful fancy. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment and sorrow, sentiments easily entwined in such a household. I scraped together this, she said, extending a small fragment of parchment. The priest accepted it reverently, the word scrawled in uneven ink, when shadows fall, truth trembles in the light. Dr. Percival hovered over the scrap with eager precision, adjusting his pince-nez as though to sharpen his vision against ambiguity. A poetic flourish, he declared. Mere sentimentality. Yet his voice wavered, betraying both fascination and unease. Father Brown laid a calming hand upon the scholar's arm. Sentiment can mask the keenest of motives, he observed. What speaks in riddles often conceals more than it reveals. He allowed his gaze to drift upward to the grand portraits once more, mothers in pearls, generals in glittering orders, poets in flowing locks, each image a whisper of pride and regret. At that moment, the heavy gallery doors creaked open, admitting Mr. Fenton, the county magistrate, and Lady Cecilia Hawthorne, whose sceptical brow was etched with curiosity rather than grief. Cecilia's pale silk gown rustled as she entered, the silver locket at her throat catching rays of light. I came at your invitation, Father Brown, she said, inclining her head. And I hope, for all our sakes, that this affair proves less supernatural than village gossip suggests. Mr. Fenton offered a curt bow and swept his gaze around the room. Ghost stories seldom stand up to daylight inquiry, he remarked. Yet as they gathered in a loose semicircle, a sudden hush fell, an absence of sound so complete it seemed audible. Lady Beaumont swallowed. "It's the quiet," she said, her voice trembling. In life, a house such as this hums with voices, servants in the kitchen, carriages on the drive, but now, it feels as though the walls are breathing. Father Brown inclined his head. "Grief has a way of hollowing out the air, madam. We feel the echo of what once was." A stirring at the far end of the room drew all eyes to Mary Wren, the scullery maid, who stood with downcast eyes and trembling hands. She had been summoned at Father Brown's suggestion. Her youth made her tale all the more poignant. "Last night," she stammered, "I left a tray of hot cocoa outside Mr Firth's door. He had taken ill with a chill, he told me so. I heard voices, 2 voices, arguing in hushed tones." She lifted a pale hand toward the panelled wall. One was deep, solemn, almost pleading. The other was cold, cruel, as though mocking him. Dr. Percival exchanged a swift glance with Mr. Fenton. "Impossible," he said. "The corridor is watched. No one could enter unseen." Mary's lips quivered. "I swear it was real. I heard footsteps retreat, then the door locked from within." Father Brown stepped forward, kneeling to examine the polished floorboards. He touched his fingers gently to 2 faint footprints, one the size of a man's boot, the other narrow and slipper-like. "Not impossible," he murmured, meeting Percival's astonished stare. "Merely human." He rose slowly, brushing dust from his cassock. "Each of us bears a pair of footprints," he reflected aloud. "The one we leave for others to see, and the other hidden within, where guilt, sorrow, and longing tread softly in the shadows." Last night, Mary heard the latter. His gaze swept the assembly. "Tomorrow, when minds are clearer and hearts braver, we will speak again. For now, let us remember that the quiet of Harwood Manor conceals voices that demand our compassion, even as it challenges our reason." A hush of acknowledgement greeted his words. Lady Cecilia gave a curt nod, Mr. Fenton sighed, and Dr. Percival's pince-nez slipped down his nose as he considered the footprints. Mrs. Ogden, tears glistening in her eyes, pressed her handkerchief to her lips. In that moment, each felt the weight of the manor's hushed confessions and the promise of questions yet to be asked. And Father Brown, so unassuming in his simplicity, stood at the heart of it all, ready to listen when others rushed to judge, ready to speak when silence threatened to smother the truth. Chapter 3. Shadows of the Mind. Late in the amber glow of an autumn afternoon, Dr. Percival ushered Father Brown into his private sanctum, for snug study at the east wing of Harwood Manor, its walls lined floor to ceiling with dusty tomes and curious artifacts. Heavy velvet drapes, drawn against the chill, made the air almost sacred in its stillness. On a polished oak desk lay manuscripts illustrated with alchemical symbols, their gilt edges glinting in the wan light. A single brass lamp cast a pool of illumination upon the scene, as though spotlighting forbidden knowledge. Father Brown removed his hat, hung it on a carved peg, and glanced about with polite curiosity rather than fear. Percival poured 2 cups of strong tea, the faint perfume of bergamot mingling with the musk of old paper. He offered 1 cup to the priest, fingers trembling ever so slightly as he set it before him. "Pray, Father," he said, his scholarly tone betraying more eagerness than ceremony, "tell me, do you entertain any belief in the supernatural? Spirits, portents, things beyond mortal ken?" His spectacles caught the lamp's flicker. Father Brown accepted the teacup, its warmth seeping into his palms. He drew breath slowly, as though choosing words with care. "I believe in the natural, Doctor," he replied gently. "Doubt, guilt, pride, these are forces far more beguiling than any spectre. They haunt the soul, and that haunting can seem indistinguishable from a ghost." He stirred his tea thoughtfully. Men speak of phantoms when what they really fear is the reflection of their own conscience. Percival's keen eyes narrowed, as though weighing each syllable against some private ledger. With a subtle flourish, Percival opened a red-bound volume of Baudelaire, its pages worn at the edges. He pointed to a penciled passage, "Le mal ist fait pour l'âme qui pense trop, evil is made for the soul that thinks too much." Algernon was enamored of such lines, Percival explained. He believed, quite earnestly, that by courting darkness in literature, one might unravel the mysteries of life and death. Do you find that notion plausible? He tapped the printed words, as if they might spring to life and speak themselves. Father Brown closed his eyes for a moment, inhaling the mingled scents of tea and parchment. An idea is but a tool, he observed quietly. A blunt tool in unsteady hands will maim more than it shapes. A keen tool in wise hands may carve magnificent art, or, if misused, fashion mischief beyond measure. He let the words linger in the air. Percival's jaw tightened, he shifted in his chair, as though uncomfortable at the parable's double edge. Their conversation paused as a sudden rap on the door announced Mrs. Ogden's entrance, clutching an envelope bearing Algernon's seal. Inside lay a brief note in careful script, "Beware the lure of hollow knowledge." Mrs. Ogden's voice trembled as she explained where she had found it, tucked among Algernon's favoured treatises on metaphysics. Father Brown took the paper in his gloved hand, glancing from the faded ink to Percival's troubled countenance. "Words can warn," he said softly, "but they can also condemn." Before Percival could reply, the deep toll of the Abbey bell drifted through the open window, its sonorous peals echoing like distant heartbeats. Father Brown set down his cup and rose. "There," he said, gazing toward the solemn sound, "is a calling. Some hear it as a summons to prayer, others, as an ache of penance." He moved to the window, parting the velvet drape. Outside, the ancient abbey stood like a sentinel atop its wooded rise, cloaked in grey light. Dr. Percival joined him, the weight of hidden worry in his posture. Father Brown laid a reassuring hand on the scholar's shoulder. "Fear not to confess what stirs within," he murmured. "For in confession we find mercy, and in mercy, the courage to face the darkest corners of our own making." Percival closed his eyes as if in prayer, or perhaps in relief. As Father Brown donned his hat once more, he offered a small, ironic smile. "Let us meet again tomorrow," he said, voice soft yet firm. "For the mind's shadows yield their secrets only when we look steadily into them." Percival inclined his head, eyes distant, mind evidently burdened by thoughts he had not yet dared to speak aloud. Father Brown stepped from the study into the fading day, leaving behind the amber glow of lamp and tome. In the corridor, the footprints they had discovered lay hidden beneath a Persian runner, waiting for him, and all who would follow, to discern the steps of truth in a journey that would lead far beyond mere locks and keys, into the labyrinth of the human soul. Chapter 4. The Scholar's Conundrum. The abbey gates closed behind Father Brown with a soft click, as though sealing him within a world apart from Harwood Manor's mortal bustle. The sky above was a tapestry of bruised purple and gold, and the cool evening breeze carried the scent of damp stone and wild rosemary. Within those ancient walls, the air thrummed with expectancy. Vespers was about to begin. He slipped into the nave just as the first monks took their places, their brown habits rustling softly against the flagstones. Lanterns hung from wrought iron chains, casting pools of gentle light that danced upon the carved capitals of the columns. A single shaft of fading daybreak pierced the narthex, illuminating dust motes that waltzed in slow motion. Father Brown sank to his knees among the novices, his chin resting upon the worn wooden prie-dieu. Around him, voices rose in solemn Gregorian chant, each note a steady pulse in the cathedral silence. Yet though his lips moved in unison with the others, his mind wandered to the mystery of Algernon Firth. Why had the young sought this cloistered silence? What secret ache had driven him across the moor on that moonless night? The chant swelled, and Father Brown closed his eyes, listening to the echo in his own heart, the echo of unanswered questions. When the final amen died away, the monks departed in procession, their censers swinging incense in lazy spirals. Father Brown removed his soutane and followed the trailing veil of smoke toward the scriptorium, a narrow chamber lined with manuscripts so old that their vellum spines whispered of centuries past. Here Brother Simon sat at a stone desk, hunched over a small volume of Augustine's Confessions. Candlelight trembled on his pale features, beads of sweat dotted his brow as though from fever. "Brother Simon," Father Brown greeted softly, folding his hands. Simon started, knocking his quill against the inkpot with a sharp plink. The sudden sound jarred the silence like a dropped coin on marble. "Forgive me," the novice murmured, bowing his head. "I did not hear you approach." Father Brown offered him a humble smile. "Peace be with you, brother. I only wish to ask how you fare this evening." He settled on the stool opposite, careful not to jostle the heavy tomes. "Algernon Firth came here, did he not?" Simon's quill froze mid-air. He swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. He came twice," the novice confessed at last, voice barely above a whisper. "Once to pray, as he said. And once more, late, when the moon lay hidden behind clouds." His eyelids flickered toward the candle. "I found him in the west aisle, kneeling so long that his knees cut furrows in the wood." Father Brown inclined his head. "And what did he pray for, do you know?" Brother Simon's gaze fell to the open book. "I did not listen. Yet afterward I discovered this," he said, pulling from beneath his habit a torn scrap of parchment inscribed with uneven, urgent script, "Grant me peace beyond the reach of mortal grief." He pressed it into the priest's hand, fingertips trembling. The priest smoothed the paper on the desk, his eyes tracing the strokes of ink. "A desperate prayer," he remarked. "One born of torment rather than comfort." He sensed a deeper hesitation in Simon's posture. The novice withheld something vital. "And what else did you observe, my son?" Simon's voice cracked. "I heard voices, soft, urgent voices, though I dared not stay. I fled before I could see who spoke with him." He clenched his fists, white-knuckled. "I feared to dishonor my vows." Father Brown leaned forward, his tone gentle yet insistent. "A stone hidden in one shoe brings no comfort on pilgrimage. You have carried this burden alone, brother. Confession is not merely to God, but to those called to bring understanding. You honor your vows by speaking truthfully." The novice bowed his head, tears brimming. "Forgive me. I feared that speaking would sully the sanctity of this place." "Sanctity is born of compassion, not silence," the priest replied. "And grief knows no walls." He rose, retrieving the candle from its sconce. The flame quivered as he held it aloft. "Let us walk, then, to where Algernon knelt." They moved in silence down the cloister passage, the echo of their footsteps mingling with the distant drip of water from the stone gutter. At the west aisle, Father Brown knelt beside the kneeler Simon had described. He ran his hand along the scarred wood, two parallel grooves marked by repeated pressure, and beneath them, an indentation, as if a small object had been pressed into the grain. A sign of his vigil, Brown mused, and perhaps of something he rested upon. He glanced at Simon. What was missing from the scriptorium? Simon's glance faltered. "A volume of St. Anselm," he admitted. "Second edition, leather-bound. It lay on the lectern this morning, but now it is gone." Father Brown tapped his chin. "St. Anselm wrote much of faith and reason. I wonder what solace Algernon sought in such company." He rose, pocketing the scrap of parchment. "Tomorrow, we shall ask the abbot himself whether he granted Algernon leave to study here, and what counsel he offered." As they retraced their steps, the abbey bell tolled midnight, each peal a reminder that time and truth march on alike. Simon unclasped his rosary, his beads clicking in the hush. Father Brown placed a comforting hand upon his shoulder. "You have done well, my son. We must follow these shadows of the mind wherever they lead, so that light, at last, may shine upon Harwood's grief." Outside, the moon emerged from its shroud, bathing the cloister in silver. In the deep stillness, Father Brown felt the stirrings of understanding. Algernon had come seeking absolution, but in so doing had stumbled into darker counsel. And in that knowledge lay both peril and promise for the days to come. Chapter 5. Secrets behind the Grange. The following morning, Mr Fenton led Father Brown away from Harwood Manor's ivy-clad turrets toward the neighbouring estate of Harwood Grange. A fine iron gate stood between manicured lawns and clipped box hedges. Beyond, the Grange's façade, of honey-coloured stone, caught the pale sunlight with a teasing warmth. Lady Cecilia Hawthorne awaited them on the gravel drive, her delicate posture framed by the tall elms that lined the approach. She offered a cool nod rather than a smile, as though politeness were a gown she had long since learned to wear with reserve. "Thank you for coming, Father," she said, her voice as polished as her pearl-handled riding crop. "I fear these events cast a shadow even upon tranquil places." Mr Fenton cleared his throat. "I was at Harwood Manor when the tragedy occurred," he explained, "and Lady Beaumont suggested you might find utility in speaking with my good friend, Lady Hawthorne. You know Algernon and Cecilia were close." Cecilia's pale eyes flickered. "Close, yes, though in ways one sometimes regrets." She led them into a sunroom where roses climbed the lattice walls, their blooms fading to brown at the edges. A marble-top table bore a single envelope, sealed with crimson wax. "I found this among Algernon's letters," she said, along with a wilted rose. She laid the items before Father Brown with an air of reluctant confession. He picked up the rose first, its petals brittle, curled like dying parchment. Then the letter, the handwriting so elegant that it might have been penned by angels demurely disguised. Unfolding it, he read aloud the solitary line within. "Farewell, my love, may truth guide you where I cannot." Cecilia's composure cracked for the briefest moment. "He left me that," she said, voice low. "I thought it poetic, until now." She waved a hand toward the green expanse beyond the window. "He claimed to seek solace in theology. Yet I suspect he sought something far more elusive." Mr Fenton frowned. "Might this not implicate you in his despair?" he asked bluntly. "You were among the last to see him alive." Cecilia's lips twitched, half in amusement, half in contempt. "Implication is easily drawn by those who wish to pin blame. But you, Father Brown, have taught us to look for deeper motives." Father Brown replaced the rose gently. "Love, like grief, can be both sanctuary and snare," he observed. "This farewell may signify despair, or the necessity of parting for a greater purpose." He inclined his head. "Lady Hawthorne, may I ask, did Algernon ever mention any quarrel between you?" Her gaze lowered. "Hardly a quarrel. More a withdrawal. He became distant. He spoke of higher truths and eternal questions. I dare say I could not follow him there." She turned to the window. It hurt. "I envied the devotion of monks, monochrome lives devoted to faith. I thought he would join them. I did not know he would break himself instead." Father Brown noted the sheen of tears in her eyes, tears not of fear but of pride wounded. "Pride can lead the heart into perilous thickets," he said softly. "A soul ashamed of affection may thrust itself into austerity, believing that cold scholarship can atone for warmth lost." Cecilia drew a steadying breath. "He borrowed my copy of St Anselm's treatise," she admitted. "I find it missing now." "That is telling," Father Brown agreed. "He sought counsel from St Anselm on faith and reason, yet hid it from its owner. A sign that he feared her knowledge as much as he prized it." Mr Fenton made a note in his leather-bound notebook. "So he cherished love and feared it in equal measure. Yet does that explain the locked room?" The priest paused, studying Lady Hawthorne's face. "Partly. But there is more. A gentleman desperate for absolution might seal himself away to confess in solitude. Yet he left no prayer, only this cryptic valediction." He tapped the letter. "It suggests both farewell and warning, to others, perhaps." He rose, moving toward the door. "May I inspect your library, Lady Hawthorne?" She led them through polished corridors lined with first editions and family portraits until they reached a lightly bolted door. Inside, shelves bowed under volumes of philosophy and poetry. Father Brown's eyes roved until he paused before an empty space. He pointed. "Here, something has been removed." Cecilia bit her lip. That must be St. Anselm. She crossed to the shelf and drew her handkerchief from her sleeve, dabbing at a thin layer of dust. Beneath, an impression of leather binding remained. He took it without a word. Father Brown turned to Mr. Fenton. "Note this, please. The man who steals guidance from a friend, then locks himself away, is a man afraid of himself as much as of others." He closed his eyes, as if listening to a distant echo. I suspect Algernon's journey led him back and forth between love and law, until one alone could no longer sustain him. In the gathering dusk, Cecilia exhaled. "What do you propose?" she asked. "I propose that we return to Harwood Manor," Father Brown replied, "and confront the silence there with these truths." He offered her a gentle smile. For secrets, however precious, find their way into the open, if only a kind heart be willing to hear them. As they retraced their steps beneath the elms, Lady Hawthorne's figure seemed less aloof, touched by both regret and hope. Mr. Fenton closed his notebook thoughtfully, while Father Brown cradled the rose and letter to his chest, preparing to shine their quiet light upon a mystery that now bore the weight of unspoken love as well as forbidden law. Chapter 6. The Locked Study. The grey dawn pressed against the windows of Harwood Manor as Father Brown stood once more before the heavy oaken door of the study. A timid knock summoned Mr. Fenton, pale in the early light, who produced his key with a quiet sigh. Behind them, Lord and Lady Beaumont, Dr. Percival, Mrs. Ogden, and Mary Wren waited in hushed expectation, each face veiled by curiosity or apprehension. Lady Cecilia Hawthorne lingered at the rear, slender fingers entwined, while Brother Simon hovered humbly near the priest. Even the stern magistrate seemed to sense that this chamber concealed more than a mere misfortune. When the key turned, the lock gave with a sonorous click. Mr. Fenton drew back the bolt, and the great door swung open upon its silent hinges. Father Brown stepped inside, his gaze unhurried, as though greeting an old friend. The scent of wax and aging parchment hung in the air, a faint swirl of dust motes drifted in the pale shaft of light from the high mullion. Upon the desk in the center, a single candle stood upon a silver dish, half-burnt and watching over the scene like a sentinel. Its dripped wax glowed like a frozen stream, pooling around the base with solemn stillness. The priest paused, his keen eyes absorbing every detail, the polished desk's surface, fretted by the candle's slow passage from one edge to the other, the solitary leather-bound diary flung open to its final entry, the window, slightly ajar, though the heavy shutters had been secured from within. Father Brown's finger traced the turned pages, but he did not immediately read. Instead, he walked the perimeter, noting scuffed footprints in the fine dust upon the oak floor. Kneeling by the hearth, he gently touched the ashen fireplace brush that lay askew. A faint smear of charcoal marked the hearth's lip, no ordinary disarray. Rising, he moved to the threshold rug, peeling back its fringed edge. Beneath lay two distinct imprints pressed into the fine dust, one, a broad-soled gentleman's boot, the other, a dainty slipper with a delicate bow at the instep. The contrast was unmistakable, two souls converging in this sealed space. At his words, a murmur rose among the onlookers. Lord Beaumont's stern face flushed, Lady Beaumont's lip quivered, and Dr. Percival adjusted his pince-nez with a sharpened edge of concern. Mary Wren trembled, her hands twisting the folds of her apron. Mrs. Ogden clasped a handkerchief so tightly its lace strained. Even Lady Cecilia drew a sharp breath, her gaze fixed on the narrow curve of the footprints. Father Brown turned gently to the assembly. "Observe," he said, voice soft yet clear. "A gentleman's tread beside a more delicate print, no mere solitary despair. A second presence, hidden until we dared to look." He paused, then approached the desk. With calm precision, he read the scrawled final entry in Algernon Firth's diary. I shall prove the soul immortal, even at the cost of my own. Darkness holds no terrors for those who believe the mind can transcend the body. At the words, Dr. Percival's scholarly detachment faltered. A hush fell, broken only by the faint drip of wax from the candle's rim. Father Brown replaced the diary gently, his voice grave. A resolution born of sorrows deeper than we imagined, he murmured. Yet this entry speaks of proof and transcendence, an experiment, perhaps far more chilling than any occult fancy. He lifted the candle, examining its pattern of burn. No scorch marks, no singed paper. He read by firelight, but he did not seek conflagration. His intent was not destruction, but discovery. He set the candle back, noting the slender silver candlestick's weight, as though chosen for its elegance rather than its heft. Had he meant to end his life by candle, there would be evidence beyond poetry. This is theatre, staged with care. Mr. Fenton stepped forward. You mean it was not suicide, after all? He asked, leaning on the desk. Father Brown offered a faint, rueful smile. It was presented as such. But suicide is confessed in absence of witnesses, not performed behind locked doors with elaborate symbolism. A man intent on ending his life does not concern himself with another's slippers. Mary Wren gasped, eyes wide. Father Brown met her gaze with compassion. My dear child, he said gently, there is no shame in truth. You, too, have cared for a friend. But the soul slipper may betray more than the heart intended to conceal. He nodded reassuringly before addressing the group. We must not linger, he said, guiding them toward the door. These footprints will vanish, the diary's testament will grow faint, and the candle's light will wane. Let us preserve what we have gleaned, and question each who might have walked here. He paused in the threshold, casting one last glance at the silent study. Tomorrow, we gather in the great hall. Each person, from Lord Beaumont to the humblest servant, shall account for their steps. As they left the chamber, the door closed with measured solemnity. In the corridor's hush, the portraits watched like silent jurors. Father Brown walked between them, thoughts already weaving footprints and diary entry into motives and alibis. In that still, locked study, he had found not only a puzzling tableau, but the first glimmer of the hidden hand that would guide him through Harwood's deepest secret. Chapter 7. The Heart's Confession. A hush fell upon the great hall of Harwood Manor as evening's last light faded and the servants' torches sputtered into life along the oak-panelled walls. The assembled, Lord and Lady Beaumont, Dr. Percival, Lady Cecilia Hawthorne, Brother Simon, Mrs. Ogden, Mary Wren, and Mr. Fenton, stood in a wide semicircle before the high table, their faces drawn in expectancy and unease. Father Brown entered last, his cassock whispering against the tiled floor, and paused to let the gravity of the moment settle upon them like a benediction. He carried no notes, no scroll, only a candle in his hand, its flame unsteady in the draught from the tall windows. With gentle dignity he placed it upon a low stand in the center of the hall, then turned to face his audience. We gather here, he began, his voice measured and calm, not to condemn in haste, but to listen and to confess. At this, Lady Beaumont's trembling lip parted. Father, will you tell us what you know, she whispered. The priest inclined his head. What I have seen, and what I have heard. But above all, what I have sought, the broken heart beneath the silence, the hidden footprints, the secret longing. He turned first to the footprints discovered in the locked study. 2 prints, his eyes flicked to Mary Wren, 1 gentleman's boot and 1 lady's slipper. Mary's cheeks burned, she glanced at Mrs. Ogden, who patted her shoulder reassuringly. These mark not simply a visitor, but a companion in sorrow. All eyes shifted to Lady Cecilia, whose slender hands constricted the locket at her throat. Cecilia raised her chin. I loved him, she said softly. Yet when he withdrew to the abbey, I could not follow. He borrowed my copy of St. Anselm's treatise, seeking solace in reason rather than in affection. Her voice cracked. I begged him to stay, but he closed his heart to me. Father Brown nodded, as though Cecilia had confirmed his own reflection. A noble hurt, yet insufficient motive for murder. Love spurned brings sorrow, perhaps, but not the lock upon a room and the staging of death a spectacle. He let the words hang before moving on. His gaze fell upon Dr. Percival, who straightened in sudden unease. Doctor, you tutored Algernon in many rare philosophies. You provided him with Baudelaire and you spoke of alchemy and the soul's ascent. Percival swallowed, his pince-nez trembling on the bridge of his nose. Yes, he admitted, voice low. He was my brightest pupil. You introduced him, Father Brown continued, to ideas of mind over matter, of ritual as proof. And yet, when his fervor grew too high, you coaxed him toward a final demonstration. Percival's eyes darted to the open diary on a small table, the entry that spoke of proving immortality even at the cost of my own. Lord Beaumont stiffened. Are you accusing the doctor of leading my son to death? He demanded. Father Brown raised a placating hand. Not leading, my lord, but tempting. For knowledge without compassion can be a perilous guide. He stepped to the table and lifted the diary cover. Listen to his final words. He read in clear, mournful tones. I shall prove the soul immortal, even at the cost of my own. Darkness holds no terrors for those who believe the mind can transcend the body. As the words echoed, Percival's scholarly mask shattered. He sank to his knees. He came to me seeking answers, he confessed, tears glistening. I believed I could teach him to soar above flesh. But when he hesitated, recoiling from my more extreme rites, his shoulders shook. In rage and fear, I staged it as his final experiment. I locked the door, cast the candle, wrote the note. I meant only to frighten him into caution, but he fell, or I cannot say. A collective sigh rippled through the assembly. Mary Wren wept openly, Mrs. Ogden covered her face. Lady Beaumont sank onto a velvet chair, her sobs muffled in her handkerchief. Lord Beaumont stared at Percival, grief and fury warring in his eyes. Father Brown knelt beside the broken professor and laid a steady hand on his shoulder. Sin may break the vessel, doctor, he said gently, but confession mends the breach within the soul. He rose and addressed the crowd. Algernon died not by his own hand, but by the misapplied hand of one he trusted most. Mr. Fenton, moved by the depth of the confession, closed his notebook. You have spoken truth, Dr. Percival. Yet the law must take its course. Lord Beaumont, hand trembling, laid a finger on Percival's shoulder. But Lady Beaumont, eye still moist, spoke softly, let mercy temper justice. He loved our son. Father Brown inclined his head. Mercy is the light that follows confession. He turned to Percival. Brother Simon, bring the wine. The novice appeared with a chalice of red cordial. The priest poured a gentle measure and handed it to Percival. Take and remember that forgiveness is not forgetting, but a promise to heal. As Percival drank, the others formed a protective circle. Lady Cecilia knelt to kiss the fallen diary, then looked up with quiet resolve. I will give my Anselm to the abbey, that his wisdom may guide others more gently. Brother Simon crossed himself. And I shall pray for Algernon's soul, and for Dr. Percival's. In the uneasy calm that followed, Father Brown stepped to the dais and raised the candle above his head. Its flame shivered, as if with tentative hope. Harwood Manor, he proclaimed softly, has endured sorrow and confusion. Yet through truth, through confession, and through mercy, it shall endure peace once more. Outside, the night wind sighed among the oaks, and within the walls, hearts, though still burdened, began to lighten. In the gentle glow of the candle, Father Brown lowered his eyes in silent prayer, grateful that even the darkest heart might find its way to the light. Chapter 8. A gentle light of truth. The dawn broke softly over Harwood Manor, pale gold spilling across dewy lawns as if ushering in pardon itself. Inside the great hall, where only hours before sorrow had weighed the air to silence, Father Brown stood behind the low stand that held the solitary candle's remnant. The company, Lord and Lady Beaumont, Lady Cecilia Hawthorne, Dr. Percival, Brother Simon, Mrs. Ogden, Mary Wren, and Mr. Fenton, gathered in a wide circle, their countenances softened by the promise of resolution. Even the portraits seemed to breathe anew, their ancestral eyes less stern in the gentle light. Father Brown lifted the small, flickering wick between delicate palms. "We are come," he began, "to lay bare the truth with kindness, to heal where pride once festered, and to mend where guilt once rent us." His voice, though quiet, carried to each listener like a benediction. Last eve, we stood upon the threshold of despair. Tonight, we step beyond it into mercy. He placed the candle upon the marble plinth and let the flame dwindle to its last glow. He turned first to Dr. Percival, who knelt at his side, head bowed. "You saw in Algernon not merely a pupil, but a soul yearning for transcendence," Father Brown said gently. "In your zeal to ignite his spirit you taught him rites of ambitious folly. When he balked at the extremity of your instructions, fear and anger guided your hand more than compassion. You locked the door not to kill, but to frighten, yet fright can be sharper than any blade." Percival trembled with contrition, tears glinting on his lashes. Father Brown moved among them, speaking each name softly in turn. Lady Hawthorne offered affection that he could not receive, for his mind was tethered to questions beyond the warmth of love. Brother Simon heard his confession and hid his burden, believing silence to be sanctity. And Mary Wren, gentle guardian of his last earthly moments, heard voices and footprints yet dared not speak until now. Each admission fell into the hall like falling petals, sorrowful yet cathartic. "We have learned," Father Brown continued, "that conscience casts its own shadows, darker than midnight and deeper than any locked door. Guilt springs from pride, and pride from fear of our own frailty. Yet confession is the torch by which we banish these shadows. In speaking truth, even painful truth, we make lament into redemption." He paused, his eyes sweeping the circle until they met Lord Beaumont's firm gaze. Lord Beaumont rose slowly. He laid a gentle hand on Percival's shoulder. "My son trusted you with his curiosity and his heart," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Your regret is your punishment. Let mercy be ours to grant." Then, turning to the company, he pronounced, "Let us remember Algernon not for his final act, but for the noble spirit that sought understanding." Lady Beaumont stepped forward and touched Percival's arm with a tremulous kindness. "I forgive you," she whispered. "For pain birthed in error holds no malice." Soft sobs rippled through the hall, and even the magistrate's stern mask softened. Mr. Fenton closed his notebook and inclined his head. "I see now that the law must be tempered with mercy. Let this be a lesson in justice and compassion alike." Outside, the sky cleared to a firm blue. Father Brown led them to the garden, where beneath a hedge, freshly uncovered, a single snowdrop had broken through frost-hardened earth. Its white bloom bowed slightly, as if in humility. "Behold," he said, kneeling to touch the fragile flower, "what seems the smallest and most easily overlooked often brings the greatest hope." Though the ground was frozen, the life within would not be contained. In that silent witness of purity, each troubled spirit found renewal. Cecilia gathered the snowdrop tenderly, and Mrs. Ogden wept into her apron, not from sorrow, but from awe. Percival pressed his palms together in silent vow, and Brother Simon closed his eyes in prayer. Even Mary Wren smiled through tears, her youthful face alight with quiet wonder. Father Brown stood among them, the unassuming instrument of mercy he had always been. "Let Harwood Manor remember this day," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "not as the hour of death, but as the hour of forgiveness, when divided hearts were made whole. And as the first true sunbeam warmed the sleeping gardens, it was plain to all that, through gentle insight and compassion's grace, even the darkest mystery can yield to a soft and healing light.